What is a feast to a poor man? Is it quality? Is it quantity? Or is it just enough to get through the day? I'm sure that some of you have been in a situation where your family has had to stretch the food dollar. Maybe you've eaten a lot of spaghetti, or maybe you grew up like me and you had Spanish rice with hot dogs cut up in it. Poverty has always been a problem. It's been a problem for thousands of years. It's a problem today. In the 18th century, it was a very serious problem. Man, woman, child, every community, everyone has dealt with it. I want to make multiple dishes. In my mind, I'm picturing a poor family, and they need protein, and they need carbohydrates, they need sugars, they need a full experience and a full belly. There was an author who attacked this very idea. This author put together Primitive Cookery in 1767, and it's a compilation cookbook where he just took ideas from separate cookbooks and he put them all together, along with a list in the back of all the different kinds of dishes that you could make for 2 or 3 cents. This cookbook offers us a glimpse into the food of the poor, the best food of the poor. Come along with me as we prepare this feast for this poor family. Before we get to a poor man's feast, let's talk about what a poor man is eating day in, day out. Sometimes it's just bread and water. Primitive Cookery starts off with things like oatmeal, bread and butter, and a glass of water, bread and cheese. We have water gruel, we have boiled eggs. We also have things like pottages, where they would go out and find herbs in the field and just boil those up into a kind of a soup, and that's it. That's your meal for the day. When it comes to building a feast, a recipe that popped out right away was a recipe for Windsor beans. Let me read it to you. To dress Windsor beans, take the seed, boil them till they are tender, then blanch them, fry them in clarified butter, melt butter with a drop of vinegar, pour over them, strew them with salt, pepper, and nutmeg. This recipe is from Hannah Glass's cookbook, probably the most common English cookbook of the 18th century, very, very popular. And he just pulled this recipe right out. Hannah Glass did not write this. This is a medieval recipe. So in the 18th century, several 14th century manuscript cookbooks were printed. And in those manuscript cookbooks is a recipe almost exactly like this. So this is a medieval recipe for Windsor beans or broad beans. We know them as fava beans. The beans will give us wonderful carbohydrates and, of course, fiber. But what we really need in this feast is protein. Probably the least expensive and most flexible protein is going to be eggs. And eggs show up in our Primitive Cookery cookbook all over the place. We can cook them in fancy ways or simple ways. We can do them simply by dropping them in boiling water, or even roasting them in the embers if we don't have any equipment at all. We're going to do a simple fried egg. I love eggs cooked that way, and I think they would have too. Where does our poor family get the ingredients for their feast? They don't have a supermarket like we do, but they do have the market. They'll go to the market at the end of the day when the vendors are selling out the last little bit they have that they don't want to take home, that they can get inexpensively or maybe even for free. It's likely that they're begging at times and they're getting handouts either from the church or just people around town. And there are circumstances where they would go out into the fields and glean or forage for whatever they could. We've got our fiber, we've got our protein. Now we need something for dessert. We need some sweetness in this dish. We're going to be using apples. Now they show up a lot for feeding workers and poor people. If you look at William Ellis's book in the 1750s, he talks about making apple puddings for field workers. Dish number 48, and it is apple dumplings, boiled, eat with butter. It's the best way of eating them. So we're gonna be doing an apple dumpling. So simple, so easy. As I keep thinking more and more about this poor man's feast, an image pops into my mind, and that's Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, when the spirit of Ebenezer Scrooge watches the feast of the Cratchit family. And they're a very poor family. They're scratching together whatever they can get to fill the plates for that feast. And in that story, the feast is all about the people around the table. It has almost nothing to do with the food. And so later on in the story, when Scrooge comes and he brings the giant turkey, their feast doesn't get any better. It was already as good as it was ever going to get. And that rings so true if we read in the journals, diaries, and memoirs of soldiers and people going out into the frontier. And they're in situations where they don't have enough food, or it's unpalatable. And yet they still have a feast. Again, it's not about what's on the plates. It's about the people you're with. As I fill this plate with food for this poor man's feast, I'm looking for a win for this family. I want this to be nutritious. I want this to fill the belly. I want this plate to be full, and I want this possible. I want this to be something that could actually be done. To fill out this feast, we have a whole wheat loaf of bread, and to drink a small beer. After a hard day's work, even this cheap ale would be very, very refreshing. Our plate started off empty, now our plate is full. This is a victory. Everyone will go away from this satisfied. This is a doable, a possible meal for a poor person in the 18th century. This is a poor man's feast, and it is very good.